Greetings and welcome to our semester-ending edition of Campus Conversations. I'm Dan Moguloff from the Office of Communications and Public Affairs, and it is my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome Chancellor Carol Christ and our Interim Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost Cathy Koshland. Also with us today is Dr. Guy Nicolette, the Assistant Vice Chancellor and Leader of University Health Services. And he's going to be around to ensure we have expert guidance and the latest information about where things stand with COVID guidelines and planning. As always, we welcome your questions, which can be posted to the Facebook live streaming site, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go along. Carol and Cathy, welcome.
Thank you.
So let's just start with the traditional table setter. Chancellor Chris, if you could just sort of share with us some thoughts about the semester that's wrapping up and what you see on the road ahead.
Thank you, Dan. Well, first, I want to begin with thanks to everyone who is watching or listening. This is such a challenging time for everyone across the country, across the world. And I'm so grateful for the resilience that faculty, staff, students have shown at Berkeley, the extraordinary work you've put in to make this first in-person semester a success. So I want to both thank you and recognize that it's a very challenging period. I talk to a lot of people who say they're feeling a lot of burnout and want to acknowledge that this is, I think, a trauma for us all, for all of us in this country, probably all of us in this world. There's also a lot of good news to share. The first good news is, of course, that we got through the semester, I think, quite well in our return to in-person instruction. I'm really proud of the campus for doing that. We have really good budget news that the state has increased our budget, not only restoring the approximately 10% cut that they imposed at the beginning of the pandemic, but increasing our budget by 5% that will enable us to give more generous salary increases, we very much hope. The campus's diversity continues to improve. Last year, I said we had admitted the most diverse class in 30 years. Now we've admitted the most diverse class in 31 years. So that's really something to feel very, very good about. We have centers that are opening for a number of our campus populations. We have a Native American center that has already opened, although it's going to have its opening ceremony in the beginning of the year. New space for Bridges, Disability Community Center, Latinx Center, that all are opening, and that's exciting news, certainly for me. I hope you all feel the joys, even with the challenges of being back in community. It's just so every time I do things that were just so usual, so commonplace before, I know I feel grateful for them. Lunches, in-person meetings. It just gives you a sense of the fact that we really are social creatures, and we've been deprived of that social texture of our lives in many important ways during the pandemic. So I hope you all have a wonderful and restorative break over the holidays. And again, thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you, Carol. Before I go to Cathy,
we are really very close to the end of the search, but the campus should not expect a public announcement until mid-January, until after the Regents meeting, because this is an appointment the Regents have to approve. And understandably, the Regents don't like you to announce the appointment before they've approved it.
All right, thanks. And Cathy, without further ado, if you could just share a few thoughts with us just about the last few months of your time in office this semester and what lies ahead in your perspective.
Thanks, Dan. I want to echo Carol and extend my gratitude to the entire campus for coming together this semester to bring us slowly, safely, surely back to being in person. It's been wonderful to be back on campus and to see the students and know, just to feel their energy and their resilience as they've navigated this fall, which hasn't been easy, even if we're back. They are grateful for being able to have in-person classes, and we will certainly be pushing towards that as well in the spring. You all have been amazing collaborators, faculty and staff. I want to especially call out the ASUC and the Graduate Assembly for their partnership and work as we've tried to understand what students are feeling, where there are needs, and to address those. And also to say thank you to our colleagues who are in leadership roles in the Academic Senate. We've had an incredibly collaborative and productive relationship with them this year, and we are immensely grateful for that. I'll just say we're working closely with the Senate on finance reform, and we can come back to that later, Dan, and discuss what we're doing there. I'll just point out a couple of other things that are exciting. We have improved our faculty diversity through strategies that broaden the applicant pool, and I just want to call out some very successful practices. One employed by the College of Engineering and the Division of Biological Sciences, which craft searches that are large and are done in such a way as to get the most diverse pool of applicants, rather than getting too narrow in what we're searching for. And that has resulted in a very different profile of the faculty that are either in the search itself and then the outcome that we have. And then the other way we're doing this is through cluster hires that are focused on areas where research and teaching have been underinvested in the campus. We have one that's complete, our cluster hire on climate equity and environmental justice. We have several underway. The Native American and Indigenous peoples of the United States is in progress. Latinx and democracy is in progress. Inequality is to be launched. Understanding, in parentheses, non-citizenship is also to be launched. And then anti-Black racism and social inclusion is in progress. So exciting developments in our efforts to diversify the faculty. And I'll just stop there.
Thanks. I'm going to ask I want to ask each of you about what you've learned just in the last semester, the last year and a half, beyond the importance of community, about the university, about our community, about higher education. But before I do, I just want to remind those of you who may have joined us late that we're here at the end of semester campus conversation with Chancellor Christ and Provost Cathy Koshland, and we welcome your questions, which can be posted to the Facebook live streaming site. So Carol, let me come back to you. What have you learned during this period? What surprised you from your unique position in an institutional sense?
Universities are reputed to be extremely traditional places that find it difficult to change. And what I've learned is in extraordinary circumstances like the ones that we've been living through, people are so creative, so inventive, able to change in time that seems, if you were to describe it before this crisis, would have been literally incredible. And so I've learned that. I've also learned the importance of constant communication, in part to make up, I think, for the fact that we're doing so much less in person. And then a strange combination of needing to be at once decisive, but also willing to change course when the facts on the ground change, when our understanding of the situation changes.
Yeah, wow. Cathy, what have you taken in and absorbed in these recent months we've been through?
Well, very much what Carol just said, that it was astonishing to see how quickly we were able to adapt and change, and how we learned over the course of planning and then having to change our plans and planning again and changing our plans, and recognizing how critical it was to be communicating a lot about that, because most people would prefer we could make a decision and then move forward. And that just is not the landscape we have been in. And that's been challenging, I think, for everyone to understand that we have to continue to adapt in the current framework that we're in. I would say we've learned a few things too, that hybrid is really hard. It works a little bit for meetings. It's really hard for faculty to have part of their students remote synchronously and part of them in person. That's probably way too much to ask. And so adapting and thinking about how we move forward when we still have some students that might not be able to attend class. So there's some challenges around pedagogy and around how we are both inclusive and yet make it so it's actually workable. So I think that's an area of further exploration and discussion as we move forward. That's probably one of the biggest things that it's on my mind at the moment.
Yeah, I'm just curious why now? Why is that got taken up mind share?
Part of it was the decision we made to have classes over 200 not in person. And that proved to be challenging for everyone. The mechanisms that faculty had developed when everyone was remote didn't work when half your students, everybody might still be remote in that class, but half of them are sitting in Moffett Library with their headphones on and they really can't participate. And so the very things that made all remote effective were no longer able to be employed. That's one. And students had a hard time if they had an in-person class and then moving to one where they had to find a place to listen to their lecture. So it created challenges for both faculty and students. On the other hand, many students have asked for and continue to want things like remote advising appointments, other opportunities where the efficiency of being able to just log in remote, have a half-hour meeting and not have to come to campus or go across campus, that's huge. So again, I think we, students, staff, faculty are all finding ways to both leverage our digital world in ways that are positive and recognizing where the limitations are and how and then figuring out how we address those.
Yeah. Carol, on that note, I'm wondering where your thinking is now in terms of how we're going to apply all that we've learned to the university and its students' benefit in the years ahead in terms of how we're using technology. Are there going to be lasting changes as the result of the experiences we've had and the lessons we've learned?
I do believe there are going to be lasting changes. We've discovered a new tool, which some faculty had been using before the pandemic, but now all faculty and probably most staff have become quite adept in. And so I think that the challenge moving forward is to figure out where does this new tool of digital learning, digital work, administrative work, where is the best fit for it? And where does it not add value? So thinking about the best uses of this new capability that we've developed is going to be important going forward.
I'm going to ask you next, both of you, about budget and finance reform. But before I do, again, for those of you who have joined us late, we're with Chancellor Christ and Provost Cathy Koshland for our end of semester campus conversation. We welcome your questions. They can be posted to the Facebook Live streaming site. Chancellor Christ, I've seen reference to finance reform, and I'm not exactly sure what that means. I'm probably not the only one. What is it in the campus context, and why is there a need for it, and what are your hopes for it?
Thank you very much for that question. Berkeley's budget is largely based on just history. You get the amount of money that you have because that's the amount of money you've always gotten. And I think that makes our budget less transparent, less understandable than it might be. So what we're trying to do is create some principles for the allocation of our funds, our core funds, that people can understand, whether those are based on majors or student credit hours. I want to make sure that people understand that finance reform is not about fixing every single problem that we have that relates to money on the Berkeley campus. That would not be a realistic project. Rather, we have a limited set of goals with finance reform. One is to create an allocation methodology that connects the monies that departments and schools and colleges get more clearly to workload. A second is to have a more uniform set of policies in regard to the overhead that would be paid to the campus from revenue producing programs. Now there is many agreements about that as there are programs, and that doesn't strike me as a good way of operating. We've also decided we want to tackle the question of grant overhead and see if we can find some way, as our grant awards have gone up very substantially, find some way of reinvesting some of that in our research infrastructure. So those are three of the problems that I hope we'll address in finance reform. I really want to turn this over to Cathy because she is taking the leadership role in regard to finance reform.
Thanks, Carol. It's a daunting prospect to be working on this, but one I think that is really critical for our campus. And we've spent the fall in consultation with deans, and in some cases, I've met also with department chairs in some of the schools and colleges to just talk about what their experience was in anticipation of the first effort that we made in finance reform in about 2017-18. What was working for them in that process? What were their concerns as a consequence of that? And I came away with the following. One, like as Carol said, really need to have a very clear set of principles as to why we're doing this and what that will be. Second, that we need to lay out the case for change. And so we are going to be developing over the course of the spring a white paper that will lay out the various challenges and issues that need to be addressed. It won't be a solutions paper yet. It will simply be an outline of where we are and the principles by which we will make decisions. We will be also in the process looking at all sources of revenue. The previous effort really separated out the revenue that comes from tuition and from the state from all other sources of revenue. And that then leaves you with not a real coherent picture of what our finances actually look like as a whole, as an institution. And there are many cross dependencies. And so it's important to be able to keep in mind the entire landscape and not just a segment of it. This will be a process that will take likely 3 to 5 years. And as Carol says, it's tackling one thing at a time or a few things at a time. I also want to say that we will be working, of course, on the FY23 budget. And there's some decisions we will make for FY23 that will not be necessarily part of finance reform, but will help lay the groundwork there. And one of that is to try to figure out a way to level. There's some units, academic units, with significant structural deficits that have been literally decades in the making, not deficits by virtue of mismanagement or anything, just an underinvestment, as well as some other areas that have also been underinvested in. If there are ways that we can create a level playing field before we then begin the process of, as Carol says, developing a different allocation strategy, that's going to be important as well. And I would say the last thing, I'll just add one more, that we are conscious of the fact that our services in some areas have been less than optimum. And we're working closely with certain administrators to really improve service delivery where it particularly matters. And in this case, it's really around service delivery for faculty in the academic units.
What do you mean by that, service delivery?
Things like doing everything we can on our campus to ensure that the hiring process is smooth and consistent. A good example is we have 4 or 5 service delivery areas and equal numbers of the ways in which we hire postdocs. Mm-hmm. Why do we not just have one process. We have, one process has 10 steps, another process has 6 or 7. It's that kind of inefficiency that is sort of maddening. And so that's what I mean about improving the way in which we do things. And my goal always is do everything we can that's under our control to make it better. And then we can all collectively complain about UC Path.
Which we're really good at.
Right.
Core competency. But so what I'm not hearing, which is interesting, and I think there might have been some fear that people had that financial reform was a euphemism of sorts for additional belt tightening, but it sounds like it's really more about rationalizing the system and equity. Is that right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And 3 to 5 years, Chancellor Chris, seems like a really long time. Is there any low-hanging fruit that, a lot of staff tend to watch the campus conversations, people who are there on the front lines in the trenches. Do you anticipate any sort of tangible results in the short term, the next year or two, that people should be aware of?
Oh, I certainly do. But I also want to reassure people that this is going to be a process of revision. If we don't get it absolutely right the first time. But yes, I expect that we will begin to see changes next year.
Got it. I want to turn and take some questions that are coming in from the audience. They're run the full gamut of sort of university interests, so be prepared. The first one says, many parents are voicing that their students are living in the dorms without any heat. Personally, our son is one of the students in this predicament. Are there plans to get this fixed immediately? Do either of you have information about that?
I don't have any information about that, but I'm very concerned to hear it because it's cold out. And I'm sure that that people in facilities are working on it right away if it indeed is true that there is no heat in some of the dorms.
Yeah, so I want to thank whoever, we don't get names of the questions, thank for sending this in, but we can assure you, as the Chancellor said, we'll be following up to see what's happening. It's the first we hear of it. The second one, the next one, another interesting area, is whether either of you have heard any news from athletics about the timing for reopening the RSF locker rooms and rec sport facilities, because people have been apparently locked out from their lockers.
No, I don't know anything about that. Guy, I don't know whether you know anything about that. No, you're shaking your head.
No. All right. I'm going to try to gather some information because we always tend to get some questions, important ones, like just as these two were, that we don't have immediate answers for, and see if we can provide some information for folks who are watching today about where we'll follow up to provide answers to those questions we can't answer on the spot. So I'm going to move into another area, and Cathy, come back to you, and also be some follow-ups for the Chancellor, just around academic innovation. It was when the three of us got together just to talk before and sort of prepare for this conversation, that phrase was really interesting. Cathy, could you unpack the phrase a little bit? What do we mean by academic innovation? What are some of the examples on campus with that?
So when we say academic innovation, it can range from changes that a faculty member might make within an individual course, flipping the classroom, doing more project-based learning, less being the sage on the stage, lecturing approach. There are various ways to innovate that way. There's ways to think about the lower division, the general education framework. So Jenna Johnson-Hanks, as Executive Dean of LNS, is leading some work to really rethink that first year in letters and science. Oliver O'Reilly just sent Carol and me a report on from a task force working on the first year experience, which has some ideas in it for changes that can happen. And then there's the larger framework of changing an entire major or program. So our Discovery Initiative has 6 teams working on academic innovation across the curriculum. 4 of them are associated with departments and transforming the experience of students, for example, in a combined effort with astronomy and physics, another in the Department of Integrated Biology, a third in electrical engineering and computer science. And then a fourth one is actually a collaboration across letters and science, across reading and composition and foreign language, where the effort is to introduce the idea of research, of creativity, of discovery in your first reading and composition course or your first language course, so that first year students would get exposed to the ideas about research, why you are in a research university, what does that mean, what's it about? So that's part of that innovation, and there's a couple of others. So it's really a combination of things. We actually had a competition. We had 27 initial applications for a grant that was donor funded, and whittled it down to 10 teams that we worked with. Bree Rosenblum, who's the faculty director, worked with those teams. And then from those 10, we selected the 6 for the first tranche of investment. And we're hoping to raise more resources to continue this effort more broadly. So that's an example of academic innovation.
I've heard a lot, or I've heard that phrase is sort of passed around a few times, computational precision health. What is that? And how does that fit into the schema of academic innovation?
So that's an innovation on sort of multiple levels. So part of our work this year is framing up the College of Computing, Data Science and Society, or CDSS. And that college will have its basis in how we use data science to address societal problems, how computing and data science underwrite those. And that college will be both a resource for the rest of the campus, as well as a hub for that kind of work. One of the innovative things that we did this year, again with incredible support from a donor, was to collaborate with UCSF and create a joint doctoral program in computational precision health, where the faculty in that program, the core faculty, 4 of them, will be jointly faculty at both 50% at UCSF and 50% at Berkeley. And a shout out to Ben Hermelin and his counterpart at UCSF for all the work they did to help define how we actually would do that. You'd think between our 2 campuses it would be easy, but it's not. And we've done that. The leadership in that was our wonderful Maya Peterson and her counterpart Ida Sims at UCSF. We're working now on curriculum. We're recruiting the faculty. It's one of the fastest moving efforts. Again, to Carol's point, sometimes we can move really fast, and we did in about 8 weeks this summer to get this whole thing in place. And hopefully we'll have the faculty here by next July, and then admit our first PhD students a year later. So it's a very exciting undertaking, and one of the first new programs that will be in CDSS.
So, Carol, I have sort of an attendant question, because often when I hear about academic innovation or sort of new academic ventures, they tend to be sort of STEM centric. What's the role for arts and humanities? What's the thinking? Or is that just, is all the innovation happen in those fields already? How are we approaching that part of the campus's academic enterprise?
My goodness, there's a very exciting program in more of the humanities and the arts. There is a new Kavli Center that we've just gotten a gift for. This work of incredibly creative work of our faculty to address the ethical issues that are by recent scientific discoveries like CRISPR. So that's an extraordinary collaboration, actually, between STEM and the humanities to imagine how this center would be formed. And I'm thrilled that we're one of 2 of the universities in the world. The other is the University of Cambridge University in England, that got such a grant.
Wow, fantastic. So in the meantime, our crack team wasted no time reaching out to the RSF. We have an answer for the person who desperately wants to get back to their locker. Let me provide it to you. It says, this comes from the RSF crew. We understand and acknowledge the inconvenience. At this point, with hundreds of guests visiting the RSF daily, our priority is supporting the campus community by utilizing our facilities safely. We will be reassessing the use of lockers and hope to have an update in early spring. I have a guess that's not the exact answer you were hoping for, but it sounds like there is hope on the horizon. Wait, there's more coming in as we speak, sorry. The men and women's rec locker rooms opened on December 1st with full access to lockers, changing cabanas, toilets, showers available in the universal locker only at this time. I have no idea what the last part of that meant, but I'm hope those of you who use the RSF do. Okay, I want to move on. Cathy mentioned earlier about, gathering resources, and it made me think about the campaign. We've been talking about money. There's an intersection there. Can you give us an update on where things stand in terms of philanthropy, the campaign, and all of that needed support for the campus?
Yes, indeed. The campaign has been extraordinarily successful in the past year. We're at $4.8 billion raised right now, and about 80% of the way to our $6 billion goal. People have been so generous during the campaign, often giving to people and programs. And so I'm really just thrilled with the success of our campaign.
Do you have any insight as to why it's been so successful? It almost seems counterintuitive, given all what's happening in the world around us. What's going on out there, do you think?
I think, well, the pandemic has been an inequity amplifier, and in part because of the increased importance of all kinds of digital services. Some people have done very, very well financially in this challenging time, and I think are also motivated to make generous contributions from their wealth. So I think it's a combination of an acute awareness of need, an acute awareness of need. One of the areas where I've seen fundraising particularly increase during the pandemic is in DIBJ areas. There's also lots of student support.
Let me stop you for a sec. DIBJ, for those who don't know an acronym.
Equity, inclusion, belonging, and justice. And lots of student support, wonderful gifts for the Basic Needs Center. So I think people are moved to use their resources, if they're fortunate to have them, to help others, and particularly to support higher education.
So $4.8 billion is a heck of a lot of money. $6 billion is obviously even more. What do you think the tangible difference is? That sort of response, that sort of uprising of generosity, what's the lasting consequences going to be for the campus?
Well, some very easy to describe lasting consequences are an enormous push for our housing initiative. We just opened an apartment building that a donor built for us and then gifted to us in Emeryville for graduate students. Graduate students now can apply for apartments in that apartment building. I think there are around 100 apartments. We also will be building a residence hall for transfer students at the corner of Oxford and University. The fences have already gone up for construction.
That's the Anchor House project?
Anchor House project, and that's an extraordinary gift for the campus. Another really extraordinary gift for the campus is the Anchor gift for the Gateway, which is the new building for CDSS, and we've since raised about 70 million additional for that. We're very actively fundraising for that. So the face of the campus will have changed. But also there is the program Cathy was just describing, computational precision medicine. That's the result of a gift. So there are new programs. There is more support for students of all levels, graduate students, undergraduates, and there are capital projects that owe their existence to the campaign.
Got it. As long as we're on the subject of capital project, there is one more that tends to find its way into the headlines with regular basis. That's People's Park. Where do things stand now with that project?
Oh, things are moving along in a very good way. The Regents, of course, approved the People's Park project at their meeting in September. And we are now moving to a point where we will be able to make an announcement, I hope shortly, about the commitments we've made to house all the people currently in the park and also create a daytime place for people to be. So those are announcements that are going to be forthcoming. We're about to open a call for suggestions, advice from the community about the way in which we're going to commemorate the history of People's Park in the park part of the park that we're developing. Walter Hood is the architect. He's an amazing architect, and I know he's eager for community input into this process.
Yeah, on the subject of housing, I noticed that there were 5,000 students who sought university housing this semester, and that was a need we were unable to meet. Was that alarm? That seemed alarming.
It's very alarming to me. Housing is so difficult to find in this area, and it's really exacerbating the problems that Cathy was describing before about students navigating this hybrid environment. There are so many students live so far from campus, they can't go home between classes and do their remote classes. So we by far have the lowest percentage of house the lowest percentage of our students of any of the UC campuses that have undergraduates, and I am very strongly committed to changing that situation.
Yeah, thanks for that. Sorry,
Dan,
Cathy,
I was just going
please.
to add, one thing that part of the demand this year was all of our sophomores wanted a dorm experience. And they weren't here last year for the most part. So we had increased demand just from students who really wanted to live with us this year, as opposed to sort of a normal year where they come in, they do live with us their freshman year, and then they often move on, and they're happy to do that. So it was sort of, but Carol's right. Given the other pressures on housing too, it's not surprising that we had that demand as well.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Cathy. And let me stick with you for the next. I want to talk about Merritt Field because we're talking about capital projects. There was regental approval. We have a land lease. We're in an exploratory phase, due diligence phase. In terms of what could be an extremely exciting public-private partnership to develop that area adjacent to Silicon Valley, aerospace, frontier technology. Talk a little bit about why this is important to the campus and what your hopes and expectations are for that project.
So that's a great question, Dan. I think there's a number of things I would say. One is we hope it's a model for ways in which we can have a physical presence that doesn't add to the density of our current campus location, where we are limited by our LRDP to very low rate of growth, and which makes sense for lots of reasons. So that's one advantage. The second is that we have a lot of capability that is very aligned with NASA. So our Space Sciences Lab, which is just doing extraordinary work, really bringing in amazing, research opportunities. That partnership with NASA, the partnership with the College of Engineering, developing an aerospace engineering major, which interestingly enough, Berkeley has never had, unlike many other campuses. So there's an area where we can come in and really take a different approach. We don't have any historic baggage associated with how we might think about an aerospace engineering program. And so I think there's an opportunity there for innovation and creativity as well. And then it extends beyond NASA in the sense that it extends beyond aerospace and space sciences. There are many areas one could imagine. There's a whole field of astrobiology. There's opportunities really across the campus. And the Merritt Field is surrounded by Google. And we already have many faculty who collaborate with folks at Google. There's opportunities potentially for internships for our students. There'll be housing at the Moffett Field site. So possibilities for visiting scholars, possibilities for a faculty member deciding to take their sabbatical year and live down on the peninsula and be there rather than being in Berkeley. So there's just many ways, and we will be this spring reaching out to the campus community for ideas of where we might add to sort of the initial clusters that we would be supporting there. And so aerospace clearly is one, but we're open for other opportunities, and there'll be a chance for the campus to weigh in on those possibilities in the spring.
Got it. Chancellor Chris, anything to add to that before we move on?
No, I just think it's a thrilling project and very, very exciting.
I want to turn our attention now to another area where I think there's been a lot of work and a lot of effort, Chancellor Chris, and that has to do with NAGPRA, which is the federal law that governs repatriation of ancestral remains and funereal objects and sacred objects that are being held not just in our own Hearst Museum, but around the country, and about our relationship with the tribes. It's an area of, I know, great importance to you. Where do things stand? What's the road ahead look like right now?
Well, first, let me say I'm really eager to return the human remains and funereal objects as quickly as we possibly can. Berkeley does not have a good record in this regard, and I want the ancestors to be able to go home to their people. We have, through a combination of funding from the Office of the President and the campus, we're investing $1 million in staff positions so we can accelerate the return of Native American remains and associated funerary objects. And the pace is already picking up, but I want to see it accelerate even faster.
And how do you think about the campus's relationship to the tribes, and what kind of importance do you place on that?
I think it's a relationship that we really need to rebuild. There hasn't been a good relationship between Berkeley and many Native American communities, in large part because of the issue of the human remains that are held mostly at the Hearst Museum. This campus was before it was the University of California, was a Native American village on the shores of Strawberry Creek, which, believe it or not, teemed with salmon in the 19th century. It's a little hard to imagine now. But I think we have to be, this is what we say in our land acknowledgements that we always speak at public ceremonies now, that we always have to be cognizant of the fact that this land is Native American land, was and is unceded, and it's a great privilege to be the custodians of this land for the purposes of higher education.
Thank you for that. Before we go on, the team is back at it. They've reached out about the students who are living in dorms without any heat, and I want to provide an answer to that to the parents who wrote in and to others who are interested. As it happens, campus facilities, our facilities team is checking into this right now. Also, the student or any student now or in the future doesn't have heat should fill out a work order as soon as possible. Their RA can assist with that. I'm told that sometimes heaters go out, but as soon as the facility team is made aware, they'll get moving on it right away. So file the paperwork as soon as you can, and hopefully the temperatures will soon begin to rise. Chancellor Chris, I want to come back to you. We're speaking about sort of relationships, and it brought to mind town and gown. Where do things stand right now in terms of the relationship between the university and the city of Berkeley?
I think things are in a very good place in the relationship between the city of Berkeley and the campus. We reached an agreement that was at the beginning of the fall, in which the campus is making annual payments to the city. We always had made annual payments, but there was a significant increase in the annual payments to the city. 40% of those payments will be used on projects of a mutual priority in the South Side area. And in return, the city both dropped its efforts to sue us on any number of projects, and has agreed for the length of the agreement not to sue us, or it would then have to sacrifice the payments that we are making. I meet with regularity with the mayor. We are really collaborative on many issues that we share together. We share the same space, the same city, and it's so important that we work together well.
Yeah, I'm curious, in your conversations with the city leadership, where does city leadership stand in terms of the People's Park project, for example?
They are very, very supportive of the People's Park project. As I think most people in the audience would know, we're dedicating a quarter of the site to permanent supportive housing for the homeless. This is going to multiply by many times the amount of housing available to the homeless in the city of Berkeley. It's about 125 apartments, someplace around 180 beds, I believe. What permanent supportive housing for the homeless means is that support services that formerly houseless individuals need will be present right in the building, and our students, graduate students in the schools of social welfare and public policy and public health, will have internships working with those supportive services. So I think it's a really good solution. In the terrible, both cold, unseasonable colds and rain, you just feel real compassion for houseless individuals. I feel very strongly that the solution to homelessness is housing, and we're trying to do our part.
Thank you for that. And when you were talking about Town and Gown, it brought to mind another area that I know is an area of collaboration and shared concern, and that's crime and policing. And it's interesting because before this conversation, I asked to see some data, and the data show that the incidence of crime, serious crime in and around the campus is in line, if not less than figures, data gathered over the last 5 years. But there's this impression, there's this feeling that the situation is worsened. What's your perspective? What's the campus doing? How are you responding to those concerns that we're hearing from some parents and some students?
Well, first of all, let me say that I really want the campus to be a safe place, and the immediate campus surroundings, which is probably, equally important to the campus itself. We're increasing our investment in the walk service that we provide, for example. We're trying the best we can to communicate what safe city habits involve, to try to avoid becoming vulnerable to becoming a victim of crime. And we're working very carefully with the city to try to see what we might do together to minimize the incidence of crime.
Yeah, thank you. Guy, I want to actually come to you because public health is another area of collaboration and cooperation between the city and the campus. As you may know, I hate to be wrong. I predicted there would be a lot of questions about COVID. We haven't gotten any, so I'm going to need to ask. I'm also curious about where things stand in terms of next semester with the Omicron virus and all the news that we're seeing in the papers right now. Where are we? What are you looking at, and what are you thinking and anticipating for the spring semester?
And Dan, we're certainly watching the Omicron, I'll say, news and science very closely. I suspect most people have saw the emerging news from Britain, from the UK, and from others where they're seeing an increased percentage of their cases be Omicron. It likely will happen here. We don't know to what extent. Will it completely take over as Delta did? So Delta was 99% of infections for some period of time. And will Omicron take that over here in the US? Because we are different than the UK, and we are different than some of the countries from which it seemed to emerge. So we really just need to keep waiting and following the science. And I completely agree with what the Chancellor said early on in the program here, is that we're dedicated to making decisions and then reviewing those and changing course if we need to as situation develops. I think, well, and for those that are interested in our campus experience, we have not confirmed any Omicron cases on campus. We continue to do some genomic sequencing of our samples, and so far have not seen that. That doesn't mean it's not here. In fact, it's probably a better bet to say that it's here somewhere, and we haven't seen it. It's seen us, but we haven't seen it, it's likely to emerge at some point. I think stepping back a little bit from Omicron and just dealing with COVID-19 kind of in a more broad perspective, there will be, we're already starting to see some of the so-called winter surge. We have more in isolation in our campus isolation housing than we had all fall. We had more cases this last week than really since the move-in week. So I think whether it's Omicron or not, we are definitely seeing more cases, expecting more cases. And so to jump to next spring, I think I most reasonably have to say we're prepared to do more testing if that's what's needed. We want to get those that are not fully vaccinated, those that have not had boosters and are eligible to get their boosters. There's no reason to wait on a booster at this point, Omicron or no. And those are the things that will protect us, including some of the other mitigation strategies that we currently have on campus: masks, indoor face coverings, and masking, limiting some of the, as the state calls them, mega events and things like that. Those are our best tools right now, and there's no reason to not do them. In fact, there's probably every reason to redouble our efforts on that. So that was a long way to say we're probably going to stay the course.
Yeah. I was just thinking, listening to you, that it must have been a heck of a last 20 months for you and your crew. How are people holding up at UHS?
Well, I'm going to be honest. It was very rough. We've lost people. Folks took early retirement, which was completely reasonable during a pandemic. We lost clinicians, we lost staff, some because of COVID and just the stressors that it induced in their home life and childcare, and some was they just didn't want to do this anymore. So we're down quite a bit in staffing. That said, I'm just so proud of the people that came here, showed up, knew that what we do is important, knew what we do needs to change because of COVID. And as the Chancellor and Provost mentioned early on, we have to develop new ways of seeing patients and doing healthcare and client care for our psychologists, that we have to learn some of the methods in which to best care for people during this time. And so we're going to see a lot of evolution too, just in the health service itself because of COVID. So I think while, yes, we're kind of feeling beat up and it's been long and it's been a marathon, I think there's also optimism and I would say even some enthusiasm for what does the future hold? How do we do better? How can we do this better for our patients, faculty, students, and staff, and better for us to really be, moving into the 2020s for real.
Yeah, thanks for that. And thanks to your entire team. It's incredible work. Carol and Cathy, I'm going to come back to you in just a second for some closing thoughts, but we have more information about the space heaters. Really want to thank the parent who presented the question. Apparently, we're having an issue on campus today, and maybe in the last few days, it's more widespread than we thought. And I've been asked to also convey that students can check out space heaters at the front desk of whatever dorm or facility they may be living in. But clearly the overall advice here is, if you're a parent, if you're a student, if you're having heating issues, let your RA know, let the front desk know. We are more than ready to respond as quickly as possible. So with that, Cathy, just a few closing thoughts, things that you'd like to convey to the community as we're about to sort of take a breath over the winter break.
Well, again, just express my gratitude for all the work that faculty and staff have done, the resilience of our students, the overall support of the community to get through this semester, and to anticipate with a certain amount of I don't know, joy and excitement, what we may be able to do in the spring, fingers crossed. I think I want to say two things. One, for many of us, the break will be a break. And I want to encourage everyone who is able to take some time off to do so. It's critical to recharge, to connect with our loved ones and friends and family, and just take time to express gratitude and joy at this time of year. At the same time, I want to acknowledge that there are staff who will work through the break for a variety of reasons. Folks in UDAR closing gifts, admissions, people reading applications. So not everyone will have a break. They'll get their break later on. And I just want to acknowledge that facility services will be working as well. So to all of them, we say thank you. And again, encourage them to take a break when their schedules permit. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Dan.
Yeah, thanks. And with that, Carol, you've got the corner office, which means you get the last word.
Thank you. I want to repeat my gratitude to the whole campus community, to the staff who have worked so tirelessly in very challenging circumstances and provided so much leadership to our enterprise, to the faculty who really literally switched on a dime to remote instruction and now have switched back to in-person instruction. The students have been so joyful. Every time I met with student representatives, the question they kept asking me is, what can we do to make sure we never go totally remote again? And then to the students, I mean, you're so resilient. You are so wonderful to teach. I know I taught a freshman seminar. It was terrific. And it's just so wonderful to be with you. So I just want to say thanks. And to, like Cathy, encourage you, if you can, and I know there's some offices that need to work over the break, to really take a break, to take time to be with loved ones, to be with family, to recharge. This has been an enormously trying time. And I know many people are feeling a kind of effects of burnout, of being, of having such a long and stressful period. So thank you, and fiat lux, and go Bears.
And thank you. I want to, on behalf of the campus and the community and folks who've turned in, thank you, Carol and Cathy and Guy, for your time and for sharing your thoughts. And for all of you, we look forward to seeing you next semester. My amazing colleague, Dawn Duvall, is working on an amazing slate of future campus conversations. And we hope you'll join us and look forward to answering your questions. In the meantime, be well, have a great holiday season. Thanks.